there are lots of things that are new. Constantly we're receiving new things, and I would like to just say this, and I say this, I try to be humble when I say this. The Indiana Military Museum now has a comprehensive collection that has got to be in the top 10 in the country. And if you haven't come to the museum lately, you need to drop by if you do love military history and love the history that it represents. We're there, we exist because of you veterans. That's our whole purpose, to honor the men and women who have served our country throughout our history. And these artifacts that are there, in my estimation, help to do that considerably. We have a lot of very interesting and unique and historic items there. If you haven't visited, the thing that we want to do tonight is present a quick slide program that'll just quickly show you some of these unique and valuable pieces that are at the museum. And I hope it will be, and it's a sort of an enticement for those of you who haven't visited or if you haven't been there for quite a while, you're going to see a lot of interesting and new things. Okay, first slide shows the USS Indianapolis submarine. It was an atomic attack submarine. It was decommissioned during as a result of the SALT talks, the Strategic Arms Limitation talks that took place, and it was in dry dock and stored for quite some time. And the U.S. Submarine Association, both in the country and in Indiana, got together and got that donated to the Indiana Military Museum. What you see there is what I call the conning tower. Today they refer to it as a sail, but that's the submarine conning tower sail. And then we built a body out from it. You can see the concrete that we poured so you could have the perception of the full submarine. You don't expect to see a submarine this far inland, you know, so a lot of people are surprised when they pull in. And consequently, since we've had this is about the 6th or 7th year since we obtained it. Now the USS Indianapolis Submarine Association has its reunion there every year, so they show up with all their. At the museum, you're going to see dozens and dozens of artillery pieces. The one that you see here is a British 60-pounder from World War I. Back about 25 years ago, I saved this from the scrap pile, believe it or not. And so we have artillery there from the Civil War right up to the present day. We have just about any kind you can think of. What you see there is a German, what they call the Kubelwagen, which was actually the first Volkswagen. They produced these during the war. It is a Volkswagen in all respects except a little squared off. And the German Army used those during World War II. So we have a completely restored one, as you can see right there. Just a quick shot showing it we have 4 events during the summer. We have a World War I event, we have 2 World War II events throughout the summer, and we have a Vietnam event. And so during the World War II events, lots of people come out and take part in the event in various fashions. Here you can see one of the local people came out with their World War II vintage automobile and dressed up for the occasion. Example of another vehicle. This is another German vehicle, by the way. It's a German World War II half-track. They're extremely rare. We're working on another one right now, restoring our second one. There's probably less than 30 of these in the world. And so this one is running, and we use it during our special events, otherwise it's indoors. Now there's another photo of the submarine and some of the items outdoors. The big building in the background is one of our 2 museum buildings. We have 14 acres at the museum, 14 acres with lots of stuff outdoors, but we also have about 40 or 50,000 square feet of items under roof as well. One of the rarest pieces we have is this World War I U.S. tank, a model 1917 Renault tank. It was designed by the French. It was perfected and improved by General Patton when he was sent over in World War I to serve in the Armored Corps. And this is a U.S. version. They made 957 of these, and there are less than 20 left. This is a World War I French field hospital truck. Looks a lot like their ambulance, but this one has all of the operating equipment inside, and it is actually the only one still in existence. The French Renault Museum has tried to trade us out of this a couple of times. They offered us 2 French post-war tanks for this. You know, we thought about it, sounded like it would be fun for a little while, but then we didn't do it, and I'm so glad we didn't do it because it's such a rare piece. The USS Vincennes, as some of you may know, was a ship that was in World War II. In fact, there were 2. The first was sunk at the Battle of Savo Bay, and the second one was into action before the end of World War II. This is the ship's bell and the steering apparatus for it. The Department of the Navy transferred all of the Vincennes items to the Indiana Military Museum. This is some shots of inside inside the military museum, and especially what we call the home front exhibit. We have a building along there which you can walk along and look inside each of the rooms. You got a living room, kitchen, dining room, so forth, of a 1940s period home. We even have an attic upstairs where you can see all the things that somebody would have found in their attic in 1940 to 45. People really love the home front exhibit, and we keep acquiring items just because people come and see that. And one thing I'll tell you, Mrs. Skelton, Red Skelton's wife, I just had lunch with her today, came and brought us a couple of things out of her kitchen that belonged to her mother. And so, I mean, it's amazing how we keep acquiring items that just adorn this exhibit. These are pictures indoors showing the home front, part of the home front exhibit, the war production, the industrial mobilization that we went through in order to win World War II happened right here in the United States, and that represents a lot of that. Another view, this is not the home front, this is an actual World War II barracks that we preserved. It was located across the river at what was called George Field during World War II, and this is one of those that survived. And just before they were going to burn this down, we got them to let us to have it, and we actually brought that in the museum down at the very end. We had to take a part of the wall of the museum out to bring it in straight in. So it shows you the standard barracks during World War II. You have the bunks, you have the officers' quarters, the medical place, the pharmacy, and so forth. So a little bit of everything in that exhibit. That is a flyable Stearman aircraft that was used of training pilots during World War II, and it was donated by an admiral that it lives, actually was from Lawrenceville, Illinois, just across the river from Vincennes, and he was flying that up until the time he was about 94. And his family kind of talked him out of it at that point, and literally it went into his hangar, and then we got it, took it apart, brought it here in a semi-trailer. So it's really still a flyable Stearman. You can see there are three photos here of what's called a Higgins boat or a landing craft. The photo on the top shows what it looked like when we got it. The big holes in the side, didn't even have the front ramp on it. The Higgins boat or landing craft, as you would call in World War II, was used at all the major landings like Iwo Jima, Normandy, and so forth. They were built in New Orleans by the Higgins company there. And of the 22,000 that were built, there are less than 14 still in existence today. And the bottom photos there show you what our Higgins boat looks like now after about five years of restoration. That's a Soviet World War II model T-34 tank. This is really interesting. This is in perfect running condition. It has all the tools, equipment, everything that it would come with. It even came with the machine guns. Making a long story short, though, Gorbachev sent this tank over in 1991 to a museum in Wisconsin, and it was operated by a friend of mine. Unfortunately, he had to close the museum because the tour season in Wisconsin is not very long. If some of you people are from that area, you know that you got about 3 months of summer and that's it. And so he had to close the museum. And he made the comment to me several times. He said, when I pass away, that tank is going to come to the Indiana Military Museum. Nothing in writing. And 2 years ago, his son called and said, hey, Pop passed away, and the tank is coming down to you. So we went up to Wisconsin, picked it up. But I mean, it's a great story. We have all of the letters and documents from the Soviet embassy. I mean, he literally just sat down and wrote a letter to Gorbachev back during, when times were good between the Soviet Union and us back in the 90s. And sure as the world, he got a response and said the premier has granted your request, and it's going to be shipped to Milwaukee and so forth. So that's how it got here. And so it's really an interesting piece of history. That's a German, what they call the 88 anti-aircraft gun. It was the most feared artillery piece in World War II. All the GIs that were in World War II would tell you that the German 88 was the thing that they didn't want to come up against. The Germans built it as an anti-aircraft gun, but they found out it was just as good on the ground. In fact, they put the 88 in their Tiger tank then, and they adapted it for ground use as well. We found that in England in really bad shape just before COVID started, and we got it purchased and then brought it over, and now we've restored it. It looks pretty good at this point. If you notice the church behind that in the background, that's a Hollywood set that was built by a guy that builds all kinds of Hollywood sets, a friend of mine, and it's much bigger than what you see there. It's probably 3 times that size. That's only a portion of it. It's all on metal framework and then plywood on top of that, and of course the plaster on top of that. And it cost $250,000 to build that set. And it took me 5 years to talk him out of it. Yeah, but he had a good year one year, and then he donated it to the museum. It took 2 semis to bring it to us. This is what we call the medium tank, or actually the light tank. It was a Stuart tank built during World War II. Everything like this that we have there operates, and we've had this in various events around the country. But it was built with 2 V8 Cadillac engines in the bottom of it and back of it. They adapted this tank to things that they already had. They had lots of Cadillac engines sitting around in 1942, and production of the vehicles was at an end, and they decided they would just build the tank around those engines. Another view of the church, you can see how much bigger it is. And in fact, when we got it into the building, which we have a pretty tall building where this is at, we still had to cut a portion of the rosette off of the top to get it straightened up that way. This is our Sherman tank, and that's the tank, the medium tank, but the best tank we had in World War II. And that tank operates. In fact, I drove that in the movie The Blues Brothers. If any of you remember the John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd and the Blues Brothers, well, we have our 15 seconds of fame in that, in the Blues Brothers. The most fun that we've ever had with that Sherman tank is one time CBS called and they said, what's a judge have a tank for? You know, that was the question. And I said, well, lots of things, you know, again, we've had it in movies. And the question then came up, well, what haven't you done with it you'd like to do? And out of my mind came this. I said, I'd like to run over a Mercedes with it. And, you know, a little bit of silence, and the guy said, can you find a used one out there? I said, I'm sure we can. He said, call me back and let me know. So I found a used Mercedes, and the next thing you know, Deborah Norville had a program on TV called America Tonight. So they came out and filmed us flattening a Mercedes with that. That was a lot of fun, actually. Another view down the line of different vehicles and so forth. You can see the flag-draped coffin there. And we actually have 3 of the original World War II shipping coffins that they brought troops back from Europe and the Pacific. And so we set up a display that we think is reverent enough. You don't see it in this photo, but we have a chaplain standing beside him with another flag under his arms and so forth. Something you just normally don't run into and don't see, and we think it's acceptable this way. This is the Vietnam exhibit. You can see a bunker built out of ammo boxes and so forth. And you can see a guard tower in the back and a little mule right there in front, the vehicle, the mule with anybody in Vietnam after the war. In World War II, the soldiers came home, they wanted a Jeep. But the soldiers came home from Vietnam, they wanted a mule. And so that's the mule vehicle there. Another view of the Vietnam exhibit. That is a machine gun turret out of a World War I German tank. You can see the mannequin sitting there right behind the machine gun, and that's a cutout portion of the World War I tank. The Germans, this might be a surprise, they only built 20 tanks in World War I. You'd think the Germans had tanks all the time. Well, they didn't. They only had 20 in World War I. That came out of one. After the war, every German tank that was still around was shipped to one of the Allied countries. France got one, Australia, England, United States. This came out of the one that was sent to the United States, and it was scrapped in World War II, needless to say. And a colonel was there on the grounds and happened to save that portion, that's the only section still left of that tank. That's a Jenny World War I training plane hanging above our World War I exhibit. There's a picture of Dwight Eisenhower standing beside the World War I Renault tank. He was at Gettysburg, ironic, but he was at Gettysburg when this photo was taken. And of course, years later, that's where his home was at. These are snapshots taken inside our World War I trench, indoor trench. We have a real 100-yard long trench outside for the reenactments, but inside we recreated the World War I trench and the dugouts, and you can walk through and hear the battle sounds in the background and so forth. Picture of our smaller building. This was the first building we started out with, but right beside it is a huge building. That's our Civil War, part of our Civil War exhibit. You can see a flag there in that box up at the top. That was a 34-star flag that was carried by troops from southern Indiana. Undoubtedly, there were Terre Haute troops behind that flag. This is a coverlet that was knitted by Custer's wife, Elizabeth Custer. And we have that was handed down through the family because part of the family ended up in Vincennes. And so that is actually knitted by Elizabeth Custer. And there's some original photos there that she had that we have of Custer and so forth. Okay, this is the Red Skelton case. On the left, you can see Red Skelton's World War II uniform. He was in the Army for 18 months, or approximately 18 months, and he was trained in the artillery. He wanted to go overseas with his group, but they wouldn't let him, and at that point they put him into the entertainment bunch. So he entertained troops on the trips over, and then he went to Italy for a while so he could visit with the troops he trained with. That is General and Secretary of State Alexander Haig's uniform. There's a case full of his items, those weapons, medals, everything you see in there belonged to Alexander Haig. His brother-in-law was on our board of directors, and so when Alexander Haig passed away, I was invited out to D.C. to look through their items and bring things back to the museum. The jacket that you see on the right-hand side, the blue, you can see the presidential seal on that. That's his Air Force One jacket. Whenever he was on Air Force One, that's what he would wear. That's World War I, one of the exhibits on World War I, a French horizon blue uniform there. When the World War I started in 1914, the French were all wearing blue uniforms and red trim and da-da-da. And by 1915, they were wearing olive drab and anything that would make them unnoticed. So the fancy uniforms went away in about a year. That is another World War I scene. The uniform on the left was a Buffalo soldier's uniform, a black soldier's uniform from World War I. The uniform on the right belonged to another Indiana general. His name was Ketchum. He was from Washington, Indiana, and he was Pershing's artillery commander during World War I. Here, this is General Patton, his tanker's jacket on the left side and his formal dress uniform on the right side. The Indiana Military Museum is the only museum that has any of these items except the Patton Museum at Fort Knox. And these came through the Patton family. In fact, Patton's grandson is on the museum's board of directors. And I think we're probably going to end up with some more things before it's over with, but we're very, very proud to have these things right there. General Eisenhower's D-Day uniform. I mean, he had more than one uniform, but this one was tailor-made in London in February of 1944. So it was made in London just before D-Day in June. And this short story is this came by way of General Henry Saylor, who was also a World War II general from Indiana, and he was Ike's best friend. They roomed together at West Point, and Saylor was his best man in his wedding. And I was down in Florida visiting Saylor's son and down there to talk to him about his dad. And he said, hey, by the way, we have one of Eisenhower's uniforms that he gave my mother as a gift. And he said, tell me, he cannot figure out why his mother asked for that kind of a gift, but he said, nonetheless, we have it. And so when I got home from Florida, that package was there on my steps the next day. I couldn't believe it. And it was tailor-made by an U.S. Army tailor. It's absolutely beautiful uniform. And there's only three places to see Eisenhower uniform: West Point Museum, the Eisenhower Museum, and the Indiana Military Museum. This is some uniforms from the Doolittle raid. As you know, Jimmy Doolittle led that raid of B-25s. It was the first time that the U.S. could get back at the Japanese after the Pearl Harbor matter and Midway and so forth. And this uniform on the right is a flight suit worn by Ted Lawson, who wrote 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. And Ted's grandparents were from Knox County, Indiana. So, in fact, they're related to some of my relation. But at any rate, that was the connection with Ted Lawson years ago, and we have numerous items that belong to him and from the Doolittle raid. That's a German World War II jet engine. It was the typical engine was on the German 262 Messerschmitt engine. It was actually built by Jumo, I'm sorry. And that is a cutaway. I found that in France one time. I found a gold mine in France at a scrapyard. Oh, you should have seen me digging through all the stuff. And so anyhow, that was one of the things we brought out of the scrapyard in France about 35 years ago. And you go to the Air Force Museum at Dayton, and you'll see the exact cutaway engine, just exactly like that one. It's super, super rare. Some of the weapons at the museum, they have a cross section. These are all World War II pieces there. There's some German machine guns, some Italian, and I see some other vintages in there. We have lots of weapons covering from the Civil War right on to the present day. That is General James Gavin's uniform. He was the youngest American general in World War II. At about 34 years of age, he was division commander of the 82nd Airborne. Of course, Gavin made all the major jumps into North Africa, into Normandy, and so forth. And so that was his World War II jacket. And you can see the belt on that is his general officer's belt with the gold buckle. Some of the women in World War II, there is a coverall worn by a lady at Evansville when they were building the ships, the LSTs at Evansville. On the right-hand side is a flight nurse, and in the middle is a Navy wave. This is, you remember General Marshall, one of the 5-star generals. This is one of his caps right there. You can see the 5 stars on it, and that is one of General Marshall's 5-star flags. This is, this is dealing with the atomic bomb missions. We've got several uniforms and flight jackets from various members of that mission, both missions, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and there's lots of items that are pertaining to that. Photo there showing Hermann Goering just when he surrendered to General Robert Stack on the right-hand side there. And that uniform, I think there, I can't see it from here very well, but that may have been part of Robert Stack's uniforms that we have. There's General Van Fleet. He was another class member of Eisenhower and Bradley at West Point, the class of 1915. And then Van Fleet was a major general in World War II. He became a 4-star general during the Korean War when he commanded 8th Army, and that's his Korean War items. You remember Admiral Dewey from the Spanish-American War, and that's Admiral Dewey's rocking chair when he was a youngster. There is a picture up at the top. You can see President Kennedy with Robert McNamara and Maxwell Taylor, General Taylor. And that's the very same uniform right there on the left that Taylor is wearing in that picture with Kennedy. And then on the right-hand side, that white uniform belonged to General William Yarborough, who was the father of the Green Berets. This is one of the jackets, a belt, and there was a package of cigarettes and various things there. These were things that were issued by the North Vietnamese to our prisoners when they were finally released from Hanoi, and our plane was allowed to come in and pick them all up. You see the photo there. There was one of them wearing that very jacket, and that's what the North Vietnamese dressed them all in. And so that's a very rare and interesting item. That is a U.S. helmet worn during Vietnam by a resident of Oaktown, Indiana. And what those 2 lines show, that's a trajectory of the bullets that went through his helmet while he was wearing it. He got a real nice crease across the top of his head, but he was able to live and talk about it. And so that's the helmet that he brought into us. We've got a picture of him holding it right after he got out of the hospital. Some of the Vietnam generals' uniforms. In the middle, you can see General Westmoreland's uniform, and on both sides, a couple of the other airborne generals from the Vietnam period. There on the left is Colin Powell's uniform, his camouflage uniform. Another part of our Middle East exhibit, which we have a sizable amount of things, both indoors and out. And that's more of Desert Storm. There's Tommy Frank's uniform on the right-hand side from Desert Storm. Anybody remember the name Cornelius Ryan? Anybody remember the movie The Longest Day about Normandy invasion? And Cornelius Ryan wrote the book, first of all, The Longest Day, and then he wrote one, The Bridge Too Far. Well, these are Cornelius Ryan's medals, his decorations, his patches as war correspondent. Frankly, when I was a young boy, he was my hero, because The Longest Day, the book, and the movie was about the only thing you could get on World War II, and it was fantastic. So we ended up inheriting Cornelius Ryan's insignia. That's a World War II early light tank that's in the museum, another Stuart tank. And that's a Japanese tank that's in the museum. Weird camo colorings, but that's exactly what they did. That is a turret, a machine gun turret off of a PT boat. Just like President Kennedy was on the PT-109. New Orleans has a PT boat that they've acquired, and they're restoring it. They came to the Indiana Military Museum to take all the measurements of this gun port because they didn't have this, so they had to manufacture one just like it. This is a milestone. The uniform on the left, the officers dress blue. Uniform on the right, dress blue. Coast Guard. The one on the left was worn by the last World War II veteran on active duty, the last officer. He was a teacher at West Point, retired as a general. And the uniform on the right-hand side is a Coast Guard uniform. He was the last enlisted man to be serving in his uniform during, he had been a World War II veteran and he was still serving. He was the last active duty serving. So it was the end of an era, the last officer and the last enlisted man. My first cannon. I remember bringing that home, dropping it in the backyard, and my mother said, "Get it out of here." I was in high school, and I got my cousin to go pick it up for me, so that was the beginning of the big stuff, the artillery and so forth, that all came later. That's an old German 1870s artillery piece. This is a photo of one of the flags hanging in the uniform. That happens to be Kaiser Wilhelm's naval battle flag. And how I acquired that, it came up for auction in Holland about 10 years ago. When Kaiser Wilhelm abdicated to Holland right at the end of World War I, of course he took all his stuff with him, and he lived in Holland until his death in the beginning of World War II. So there was a museum in Holland that inherited all this stuff, and after a while they decided they had too much of it, and they put some of it up for sale. That's how I acquired that piece. That should be, and that's all, folks. I hope that some of these pictures will entice some of you to come and visit, because there are so many more things. I mean, this is just a sprinkling of what we have there. I mean, I've traveled to see museums all over the world and all through the country, and I can guarantee you this is one of the best right here in southern Indiana. So keep us in mind if you ever run across anything you think we might need.